Hey there, coffee lovers. Ready for another deep dive with me? This time we're tackling something that might just turn your coffee world upside down. Imagine you're there, meticulously weighing your beans and timing your bloom perfectly, all for that perfect cup. But what if I told you that one of the things we tend to obsess over most water temperature might not be as crucial as we've always thought?
You're right. We're going to be looking at a research study that's making some waves in the coffee world. Even the title itself is a bit of a head-scratcher. Brew temperature at fixed brew strength and extraction has little impact on the sensory profile of drip brew coffee.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement, especially when you consider how much emphasis is put on temperature in the coffee world.
Exactly. Like the Specialty Coffee Association, the SCA, their brewer certification process requires hitting specific temperatures. It's like they're saying temperature is make or break for quality coffee. And this research is like, hold on a second, not so fast. It's suggesting that those precise degrees might not be the magic key to unlocking amazing flavor after all.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. So why did these researchers decide to zero in on temperature in the first place?
Well, they noticed this widespread belief that higher brewing temperatures equals higher quality coffee, automatically. They wanted to put that belief to the test, with a rigorous scientific approach to see if temperature really lived up to the hype.
So basically they were on a mission to debunk some coffee myths.
Yeah, you could say that. They wanted to isolate the impact of temperature, separate it from all the other factors that come into play when you brew coffee. So to do that, they brewed coffee at 3 different temperatures, meticulously 87, 90, and 93 degrees Celsius. But they didn't stop there. They also brewed across a range of brew strength and extraction yields.
Okay, whoa. Hold on. Let's break that down a bit for our listeners. What do we mean by brew strength and extraction yield?
Oh yeah, of course. Great question. These are two really important factors that play a massive role in how your coffee ends up tasting. So brew strength basically refers to the concentration of coffee solubles in your cup. It's often measured as total dissolved solids, or TDS for short. Think of it this way. Higher TDS generally means a stronger, more intense cup.
Okay. So if I'm tasting a coffee that's super bold, almost syrupy, that would be a sign of high TDS.
Exactly. Now, extraction yield is often referred to as percent extraction, or PE. And that tells you how much of the good stuff, the soluble compounds from those coffee grounds, you've actually extracted into your cup.
Gotcha. So TDS is about concentration, and PE is about how much flavor we're pulling from the beans.
Makes sense.
Now back to the research. So they were varying temperature, TDS, and PE.
Exactly. And to really hone in on temperature's impact, they used a tool called the Coffee Brewing Control Chart. This helps coffee professionals map out their brewing parameters, things like TDS and PE, to achieve a desired flavor profile. By carefully controlling those variables, the researchers could really isolate temperature's effect on the sensory experience.
So it sounds like they were super thorough, making sure they were only changing one variable at a time. What did they find after all this meticulous brewing?
The results were, well, they were surprising to say the least. They found that when TDS and PE were held constant Barris, the brewing temperature had virtually no impact on the coffee's flavor profile.
Wait, are you serious? So all this time we've been stressing over hitting that perfect temperature. And it might not even matter that much.
That's what it seems like. Of course, this is just one study, but it definitely challenges the conventional wisdom around coffee. And the implications are pretty significant.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if temperature isn't the big driver of flavor, what is?
Well, the research suggests that TDS and PE are the real MVPs when it comes to how your coffee tastes. They found that specific taste attributes were directly linked to different levels of TDS and PE.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about those connections.
Sure. So, for example, they found that bitterness increases as TDS goes up, which makes sense. The higher the concentration of dissolved solids, the more intense and potentially bitter the taste.
So if I'm trying to brew a less bitter cup, I should aim for a lower TDS.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to sourness, it gets a bit more interesting. They observed that sourness actually decreased as they increased the PE, even when the TDS stayed the same. This suggests that brewing for a bit longer, which usually means a higher PE, might actually mask some of the acidity in the coffee.
That's really interesting. So even though a longer brew might extract more from the beans, it doesn't automatically mean a more sour cup. It's all about that balance between TDS and PE.
Precisely. And that's where things get exciting for coffee enthusiasts. This research suggests we have more control over the final flavor than we thought. And it all comes down to understanding how TDS and PE interact.
This is already making me rethink my entire brewing approach. But before we get too deep into TDS and PE, let's circle back to temperature for a sec. If it doesn't really affect flavor, What does it affect?
That's a fantastic question. And it leads us to some of the most interesting implications of this research. What if I told you that brewing at lower temperatures could actually be a good thing?
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about it. Use less energy, there's less risk of burning yourself, and potentially you might even lower the risk of certain health issues that have been linked to drinking really hot beverages.
So lower temperatures could be a win-win for coffee lovers and the planet. This is groundbreaking stuff.
It really is. And it opens up a whole new way of thinking about coffee brewing. We've been so focused on hitting those high temperatures, but maybe it's time to reconsider what's truly important.
I'm ready to rethink everything I thought I knew about brewing. But before we go too deep into the practical implications of all this, let's take a closer look at the sensory experience itself. We've touched on bitterness and sourness, but what about other flavors? Did the study explore how temperature, TDS, and PE affect those more nuanced notes we all love in coffee?
Absolutely. That's where the research gets even more fascinating. They looked into how a whole range of flavor attributes are affected by these factors, and they found some surprising patterns.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's unpack those sensory details in part 2 of our deep dive.
All right, so we've established that TDS and PE, they're really the stars of the show when it comes to coffee flavor.
Right.
But it gets really interesting when you look at how they affect those specific notes that we taste in a cup.
Okay, let's talk about those sensory details. Where do we even start?
Well, one of the most surprising findings was that out of all the flavor attributes they tested, only one was actually significantly affected by temperature.
Really?
Can you guess which one?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to take a wild guess here and say bitterness.
That's a good guess, but not quite. It was actually nuttiness.
Nuttiness. Wow. That's not what I was expecting. So that classic nutty flavor we get in coffee that's actually connected to temperature.
Yeah, to a small degree, the study found that nutty flavor was a bit more intense at higher brewing temperatures. But here's the thing. The difference was statistically significant, but it wasn't huge in terms of what we actually perceive.
So even though temperature might play a tiny role in that nutty note, it's probably not something most people would pick up on in a blind tasting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all the other flavors, floral, fruity, chocolatey, caramel, those all seem to be mainly driven by TDS and PE.
That's pretty mind-blowing. It's like we've been focusing on the wrong thing all this time.
It does challenge our assumptions, doesn't it? But let's not forget about the other important parts of the sensory experience, like mouthfeel and those not-so-pleasant sensations like astringency. TDS actually plays a big role there, too.
Okay, tell me more.
They found that bitterness, astringency, that drying, puckering sensation and viscosity, they all increased along with TDS. It makes sense when you think about it. Higher concentration of dissolved solids, thicker, more intense, the mouthfeel.
Almost like you can feel the TDS on your tongue.
Right.
So if I'm tasting a coffee that feels heavy and coats my mouth, that's a sign of high TDS.
You got it. It becomes a much more tangible concept when you experience it that way.
That's so helpful for understanding how to adjust my brewing to get the mouthfeel I want.
Exactly. Now, remember how we talked about sourness decreasing with higher PE? Well, the study also looked at a cluster of flavors that followed a similar pattern. Sourness, citrus, dark greens, smoky browns, spice-fermented flavors. All of them increased with TDS, but actually decreased with PE.
It's interesting. Why would those flavors behave that way?
It probably has to do with how quickly different compounds are extracted. Organic acids, the ones that cause sourness, and those related flavors, they're extracted pretty fast, so at a higher TDS you get more of them. But as PE goes up with longer brewing, other compounds start to extract and might actually mask those acidic notes.
So it's like a delicate dance between all these different flavor compounds.
Yeah,
And depending on how we brew, we can kind of shift the balance one way or another.
precisely. It's like you're conducting an orchestra of flavors.
Oh, I love that analogy. Now, there were two flavors that kind of did their own thing, brown roast and ashy. They increased with both TDS and PE, but only up to a point. What's happening there?
That's a really good question. Honestly, the researchers weren't entirely sure themselves. They thought maybe these flavors might actually contribute to that decrease in perceived sourness at higher PE levels,
Yeah.
almost like they're counterbalancing the acidity.
Fascinating. It seems like there's still so much we don't know about how all these flavors interact.
Right. That's what's so great about coffee research. There's always more to learn. Now, before we move on, there's one more flavor we need to discuss: black tea. Remember we mentioned that it had the opposite pattern, being most intense at low TDS and high PE.
Oh, yeah. That definitely stood out to me.
What's really interesting about that is it suggests that the compounds responsible for that black tea flavor are extracted much more slowly than others. It challenges that common idea that longer brews always equal more bitterness.
It really throws a wrench in things.
Hmm.
I guess it means we have to rethink how we approach extraction. It's not just about how much we extract, but also what kinds of compounds are being extracted at different rates.
Absolutely. It opens up a whole new level of precision and control for coffee brewers. It's a great question. The world of coffee brewing is much bigger than just drip.
For sure.
Yep.
So let's start with something like French press. We've got longer brew times. The coffee grounds are sitting in the water the whole time. Do you think temperature would matter more there?
It might.
Yeah.
It's possible that longer contact time could mean that temperature has a bigger influence on extraction, but we have to remember what this study showed. TDS and PE are still the main drivers of flavor.
Right. So even with a French press, we can't just forget about everything we've learned about TDS and PE.
Exactly. This research doesn't completely change those basic principles, but it does add another layer to what we know. I think it would be really interesting to see how that interplay between temperature, TDS, and PE works in a French press.
Okay, so French press is maybe still up in the air. But what about espresso? High pressure, super fast extraction. It's totally different.
Yeah, espresso is its own world. The researchers actually said that espresso is probably way more sensitive to temperature and pressure because of how fast the extraction is. Those tiny temperature changes that might not matter so much in drip could make a huge difference in espresso.
That makes sense. I mean, baristas are so precise with their espresso techniques.
Oh, yeah. They know that even the smallest changes can completely change how the espresso tastes. This research kind of backs up the idea that temperature control is super important for espresso.
So with drip coffee, we might be able to relax a bit about temperature. But espresso is still all about being super precise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, thinking beyond the brewing methods themselves, there's another really interesting aspect of this research that we haven't talked about yet, the potential health implication.
Oh, right. The study mentioned a possible link between really hot drinks and a higher risk of some cancers.
Yeah. There's some evidence suggesting that regularly drinking beverages above 65 degrees Celsius could be a risk factor for esophageal cancer.
Wow. So brewing at lower temperatures could maybe have some long-term health benefits.
It's definitely something to think about, and it's another good reason to maybe question those high-temperature brewing standards.
It's incredible how this one study has opened up so many new things to explore. We've gone from the science of extraction to the environment triumphs, consumer choices, and now even potential health benefits.
It really shows how everything in coffee is connected. Every decision we make, from choosing the beans to the brewing method to the temperature, it all affects the final cup.
It's like a reminder that there's always something new to learn. Even something as simple as brewing coffee can be a whole journey of discovery.
So true. And who knows what other surprises are out there waiting to be discovered in the world of coffee research.
I can't wait to see what we learn next. So for all you coffee lovers out there, what's the takeaway from all this? Don't stress so much about hitting that perfect temperature when you're brewing your drip coffee. Focus on your TDS and PE. Play around with different brewing times and grind sizes to find what you really like.
And remember, sometimes lower temperatures might be the secret to unlocking those amazing flavors we love in coffee. Plus, it's more sustainable and maybe even healthier.
This research has really changed how we think about brewing coffee. And while this deep dive has been super interesting, it's just the start. There's a whole world of coffee out there waiting for you to explore. So keep experimenting, keep learning, and most importantly, keep enjoying that perfect cup.